Good afternoon and welcome to Across the Fence. I'm Jolie Whitney. The Soil Health Research and Extension Center, SHREC for short, provides Vermont farmers, agricultural service providers, and university researchers with a cross-disciplinary research and extension hub focused on holistic soil health. The bottom line, SHREC delivers results, recommendations, and education throughout Vermont. Before we meet today's guests, the UVM Food System Research Center and the Office for the Vice President for Research and Economic Development has put together a short video about the SHREC lab. Take a look.
Sustainability really starts with soil. Soils really play a lot of really important ecosystem functions if we take care of them. But if you can manage your soil well, that's like wealth. University of Vermont has had a laboratory for 50 plus years focusing on soil testing. Two big things the farmers are asking: tests and results that reflect their management practices, and secondly, to include more measurements that reflected the biology of soil. So those, I think, are two pillars that really develop the mission or the vision behind SHREC.
In the past, farmers in Vermont could send their soil samples out of state for testing, but it wasn't informed by land-grant knowledge and calibrated just for Vermont soils. SHREC is an opportunity for Vermont farmers, Vermont extensionists, Vermont researchers to get Vermont-calibrated information for Vermont soils, Vermont farming systems, and the Vermont climate.
Working with farmers, they live and breathe and, work it. And they've given me a lot of good ideas that led into important research projects for myself. And I always really valued that because I felt like then I knew what I was doing was really going to, have an impact. So the way the lab works is the farmers will receive instructions and guidelines about how to collect the sample and then mail it or drop it off at the lab. The lab is analyzing those soils and then preparing a report that includes the results as well as some background materials about what that means and management practices that can be implemented to change it.
In SHREC, we offer information on not just how much carbon is within their soil and organic matter within their soil, but what types of carbon and what types of organic matter are in the soil, and that matters. We're also providing some information about aggregate stability, so how well does a soil hold up to the impacts of heavy extreme storms, which we're seeing more of with climate change. Help farmers understand what practices they can do to help minimize erosion and soil loss from their land. We're also providing some information about ACE proteins, newer tests that helps farmers understand what the total amount of nitrogen is available within their soils.
Another component, obviously, is education. We want people to understand the value and, what these measurements are and what they mean, and we need feedback. So we're offering workshops, focus groups, field demonstrations where farmers are going to be full participants in that. We like to have that feedback. That it's a win-win situation.
We're not just producing test results for researchers. Research is very important and it'll be part of SHREC's mission, but ultimately we want farmers to be able to access the tests we're providing and to use that information and really put it to use in their farming on a day-to-day basis. Having healthy soils is really critical for a thriving food system. I think the future direction of soil health testing is that we're going to need very local information, state-based information, and I think we're in a very good position to do that for our farmers here in Vermont based upon our farming systems and our climate.
Joining us to talk about all things SHREC are Deb Neer, SHREC Associate Director and Soil Ecologist, whose research career has focused on biological indicators of soil health, and Joshua Faulkner, who leads the UVM Center for Sustainable Agriculture and directs the SHREC Lab. So welcome to both of you.
Thanks, good to be here.
Yeah, absolutely, and I know we're going to get into the weeds a little bit about soil, but first tell me, Deb, what's the difference between soil and dirt?
Great question.
One of my favorite sayings is stop treating our soil like dirt. So dirt implies it's something that you don't really want, right? Soil acknowledges that it's alive. And I think it's really important because if we start thinking about it as a living entity, then we value it more.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And what does soil kind of mean for a farmer or a gardener? How does that impact their work?
Well, one of the things I would say, building your soil health is probably one of the best investments a farmer can do, because that is the basis and foundation really for producing food. So, and one of the analogies I like to think about, with the living is you want to keep thinking about soil as a whole entity in terms of air, water, and a structure. And if you want to think about the life, you need all of those. You need a habitat, you need food and water. So trying to maintain a good balance.
Absolutely. And Joshua, we featured your work on Across the Fence before, so what does having this lab mean for your research?
Oh, I think having these capabilities in Vermont is pretty big for us. For one, it just makes submitting samples that much easier. It means getting results quicker. And then above all, and I think this is important for farmers too, and I mentioned this in the video, is that these results that we're going to be able to produce in our SHREC lab here at UVM are kind of put in context for Vermont soils and other soils within Vermont. They're not sent to an out-of-state lab where they're stacked up against soils from the Midwest or the Southeast, and kind of they're very localized in that nature. And I think that helps us do better science when we have that local information.
Absolutely. And before SHREC started, how did you guys test soil?
Well, we've always been able to, UVM's offered soil testing for decades, and that's really been the routine soil testing that we would make recommendations to a farmer or gardener about nutrient applications, fertilizer for a particular crop. But for soil health testing, if Deb and I wanted to do that in the past, we'd go to the field, we'd take our samples, we'd kind of hurry back to the lab, keep those samples cool, package them up, expedite shipping, 2-day shipping or overnight shipping to a lab somewhere in another state or in the Midwest somewhere, and then wait, sometimes 2 to 3 months to get results back.
So is it just really big commercial farmers or gardeners submitting samples, or can anybody?
No, really, I think this is a lab that can help serve gardeners up to farmers, no matter how small or big. And it's really a variety of farms too, growing vegetables or tree fruit, pasture-based farms, hay, and of course dairy farms that are growing field crops like corn and soybeans. I will say, I think it's going to appeal to the farmer who's really curious about understanding how changing management on their particular garden plot or farm is going to make a difference in their soil health. And I think they could approach that a couple different ways. They could have 2 fields or 2 plots and do some testing to get a baseline, and then change something on one of those fields or one of those plots and then track it through time with some more testing. Or they might, if they have 1 field, do some baseline testing, make a change, and then test again, maybe 2 or 3 years later.
Sure, so it's a process.
It is a process.
Absolutely. And Deb, what kind of tests do you guys do there?
Yeah, well, what's really new about the new tests that we're offering, in addition to what's been existing, we're really trying to focus on tests that can be responsive to management. And also we're adding some that relate to biology. And both of those are attributes that we receive requests through a farmer survey that we conducted a few years ago. Previous results they would get, maybe weren't on the right time scale. Maybe they were responding over such a long time period or too quickly, like within weeks or something. We need metrics that measure changes, that measure it through a season. So we're adding things about, measuring transformations of carbon, which are really important, as well as nitrogen, and ratios of different kinds of organisms in the soil.
And Josh, you talked a little bit about how things are different from soil here versus in Michigan, but is it different across Vermont? Is something in Virgins going to be different from something in Bennington?
Yeah, we do have a variety of soils in Vermont. And I think kind of the big difference is when you look at the Champlain Valley and then outside of the Champlain Valley, we have great soils all over the state. Some of our floodplain soils are really productive. The clays in the Champlain Valley are pretty unique and special, I think. They have their challenges for farming, but from a research perspective, I just think they're fascinating and incredibly cool to study.
Sure. And Deb, is this as much about soil type as it is how you manage the soil?
Oh, that's a great question. Soil type is really based on kind of the mineralogy of soil, based on the bedrock in terms of it. So our focus is really more on the management, because farmers want to know, what if I change my practice and add, cover crops, for example, or reduce tillage? What impact is that having on my soil health? However, the interpretation of the results does depend on soil type.
All right, and this might be kind of, oh, go ahead.
Oh, no, I was just going to agree with Deb. Absolutely. I think that's where the rubber meets the road, is the interpretation and what the recommendation is to the farm. And we'll be developing that over the next few months and years.
And this, I'm assuming, is kind of variable based on a lot of practices, but if somebody has a clay field, for example, what would be the recommended practices?
That's a great question. I think it depends on what the results of their soil health test would say. And we're glad to consult with farmers on that. We have some resources developed that can give them a good start, but if they have questions about specific practices to improve one of those soil health indicators, we can certainly make some recommendations and walk them through some options.
Absolutely. And Joshua actually mentioned having maybe 2 fields and changing it up there, but how specific can this get? Can you go row by row for testing?
Well, there's nothing, it's really your choice. There's no magic size or area. But one thing, if you have, a large area that has really 2 or 3 kind of distinct soil types or management practices, you might want to think about getting a sample from each of those. Now, when I say a sample, I might just add that it's not just sticking a shovel in there and putting it in a bucket and shipping it off. There's a lot of variation and aggregation within that soil, so it's important to take multiple kind of samples across that area. Each of those would be at equal distance, so we can remove any kind of bias, but we want to go across that area, combine them, mix them, and then send in about 2 cups of soil to the lab for testing.
All right, thank you so much for joining us today. And if you would like to, if you or a commercial grower would like to get your soil tested, you can follow the link on your screen and you can see SHREC action for yourself. And that takes care of our program for today. I want to thank the crew behind the scenes here at WCAX. I'm Jolie Whitney. This is Across the Fence. Have a good one.